everybody. Welcome to the conversation. I'm so excited to be here today, um, talking about reading and reason with two very special people. Dorsey Hammond, who I've known for many years now. He's professor emeritus of Oakland University in Michigan and Salisbury University in Maryland, and his partner in many things, in writing and teaching and research in particular, is Denise Nessel, and she's actually joining us from Australia. So great to be with both of you. I want to start, Dorsey, I'd like you to introduce Denise after I talk about you a little bit, because I know you very well and I don't know Denise very well yet. But Dorsey and I met unexpectedly for me. It was at the International Reading Association annual meeting, now called International Literacy Association. And it was in Chicago in 1981. And you might be surprised or not to know that it was very much a time like today where people were, let me say, phonics crazed, and that's being gentle to say it like that. And I was going after session about, teaching phonics first. And then I happened into Dorsey's section, into his session. And he was the first person that I heard speak, I thought, rationally and philosophically and morally about teaching reading. Because he talked not just about phonics, that was part of it, but he also talked about reading and writing and comprehension, and that reading is always a meaning first proposition. And so I went up to, I didn't do the, I'm kind of a shy person, at least at that time, but I went up to him afterwards and I said, Dorsey, thank you for this session. It's the best information I've heard or read anywhere. Thank you so much. I need to know more. Will you be presenting anywhere in Ohio where I live? And he was presenting, I think it was Bowling Green University, and he invited me to be his guest. And so I sat in the front row and I just inhaled everything that he was saying, and I've been following him ever since. So thank you for that, Dorsey.
Thank you, Regie. It was my good fortune, I assure you. I want to introduce Denise Nessel. Denise and I went through the same doctoral program, but she went through it a bit later than I. And I learned how skillful she was in working with classroom teachers and how bright she was and what a good writer she was. So in the 1980s, Learning Magazine asked me to put together some summer courses for different universities. And I asked Denise to join me, and we worked together. And then later, when I decided to write the comprehension book, which you had been urging me to write, Regie, for several years, I asked Denise if she would co-author it with me. And fortunately for me, she said yes. The book is the Comprehension Experience is half mine and half hers, and we collaborated on the book, and it was a really good experience. Now we continue to write together from time to time and put things on our website. We also write individually and give each other feedback. So it's been a wonderful professional relationship.
Thank you for that. And I want to show you their book because is this an unheralded book? And it is my favorite book of all time for teaching reading really well. And the title, The Comprehension Experience, Engaging Readers Through Effective Inquiry and Discussion. And this was published in 2011, and it's as timely now and as needed now as it's ever been. You can see all of my post-its. I go back to it all the time. Your experience, both of you, Dorsey and Denise, you had hundreds of hours of experience, I know, in K-1 classrooms in teaching reading, and it was not spent just on phonics. In fact, that was a small part of it. What both of you are gifted at is even with the youngest children, having very rich discussions and helping teachers know how to do that, to get that conversational language and get kids self-monitoring and talking about books on a very high level, what we call productive talk. So your contribution is amazing. And so if you don't know this book, we'll tell you you'll see when you see the recording, when you're watching this, you'll have information on how to get it. You want to have it, especially these days. We really need it. So let's get into our conversation today. People generally agree that comprehension is the goal of reading. That's pretty much true everywhere. But you don't hear much about that these days. So how and why do we need to change that?
Well, I think we all agree that comprehension is the goal of reading, but what we sometimes miss is that comprehension is a contributor to the learning to read process, a major contributor. I'm reminded of Gordon Wells' wonderful book, The Meaning Makers, where he talks about children learning language and using language to learn. The same thing is true about reading, the meaning makers, children learning to read and reading to learn. Uh, but they are not sequential, and that's the key. They're reciprocal. In other words, you're reading to learn from the very beginning, and they feed off of each other. And so comprehension has to be taught on the first day, just as you would be teaching phonemic awareness or phonics as well. It can't be delayed until some other time. And so my view, Regie, is that, and Denise as well, is that any model that says, well, first you start with phonics, phonemic awareness and phonics, and then you do fluency, and then you deal with vocabulary, and then finally you get to comprehension, is just a very, very flawed model of reading. And we're seeing scores staying about the same and not going up, even with all of this emphasis on phonics. So, as you said in one of your books, I think it was the Essential Teaching book, you have a chapter called Meaning First. And I've always liked that chapter, and it's a critical point. It really is. So it's not phonics first; it's phonics and meaning and language, all three working together at the same time in the beginning reading process.
Absolutely. Did you want to
Yeah,
add?
I'd like to add to that too, because it seems to me that we sometimes forget that when children come to school, they have been spending, 3, 4, 5 years already learning and comprehending. They've been learning since infancy.
Mhm.
And that cognitive language behavior that they have acquired through their learning experiences, just because they're developing as human beings, they bring all of that to the classroom when they first come to school. So it's not as if they're coming as a complete blank slate. They're coming as thinking individuals and language using individuals when they arrive at school. And we need to build on that instead of assuming that we have to start at some sort of ground zero that we define as ground zero. So it's I think we all agree it's very important to look at the process of learning and the learner, as well as just what it is we're trying to teach them.
Absolutely. Very, very important.
Go ahead, Regie.
No, I was going to say, well, and one of the, building on your point, Denise, one of the problems that I see, and I know we all agree on this, is that we're not giving kids with that huge phonics emphasis, we're denying kids the time really to read books because they're spending all the time on skills work and word work. And we're actually making reading harder for kids by, there's a big controversy now about the cueing systems, and that's a big part of Mari Clay's work. And I'm reading recovery trained, and it's so, so important that kids have all, I remember when I was working with children, it wasn't just, sounded out and teaching that, it was a cross-checking that was such a big part of her. Does it look right? Does it sound right? Does it make sense? And of course you were allowed to look at the pictures. We want to give kids as many supports and structures as scaffolds as necessary for them to make sense of text, not limit them just to phonics. And so I think the way we all look at, the three of us and many other people, is it's phonics, reading, and writing, and they're joined together. It's not, just one is so important. My worry is that kids are not reading books now because they're spending, and we're losing classroom libraries to decodable texts, and it's really up to teachers, knowledgeable teachers, to set this right. And I think that's happening. It's difficult. It takes courage. It takes knowing the research, which the two of you and many others are very good in sharing with everybody. But the queuing systems has taken a big hit, and that's unfortunate. And I know, Dorsey, you wanted to say something about that.
No, I just was going to follow up on what you were saying and what Denise was saying. 5-year-olds bring two very critical talents to school when they come to kindergarten or first grade. One is their talent for learning language, They have learned more language between age 1 and age 5 than they will ever learn in any other 4-year period in their lifetime. They're really good at it. The other thing that 5-year-olds bring is a sense of making sense. 5-year-olds don't like nonsense. They are always asking questions: why, how come, what if, and so on. And they're trying to make sense of the world. Now, when we tap into those two systems, the ability to learn language and the ability to make sense of their world, the sooner we do that, the more we do that, the more successful readers we're going to have.
Yeah, both of you have always said that reading is a language and thinking process, and we don't want to lose that. And especially when you talk, Denise, about what kids bring to school, and we have to remember that we have so many kids with multiple languages, kids learning English as a second language, and honoring your point, Dorsey, making sure that we're not just teaching them phonics, but we're honoring their culture, all of the traditions in their family, and writing about that, and making that part of teaching of reading, bilingual books. How does your family celebrate this holiday? Bringing their strengths into the classroom and using that in the reading writing program.
And that's why kindergarten and first grade classrooms, all classrooms actually, but kindergarten and first grade classrooms particularly, must be language rich. You know, a lot of reading too, a lot of reading with, a lot of scribbling, a lot of writing, a lot of conversation, a lot of singing and songs, and particularly, well, for any child, but particularly for those second language users or learners, that is really critical. And you build the foundation of oral language, and it needs to be print rich as well. You know, the classroom needs to be filled not with only books, but with magazines and newspapers and circulars and posters and all kinds of print that's in our environment that would be in the classroom. So, you know, the criteria for a really good kindergarten, first grade classroom, one of the criteria is it must be oral language rich and print rich. And that's where you build that foundation.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's where the meaning comes in, because the more you make the language, the more you make the environment language rich and print rich, the more children have to tap into the meaning around them and to create meaning and seek meaning and find meaning, discover meaning. And all of that is going to help them learn the coding system that the language is encoded into. And you know that system isn't the only thing that's going to help them read. It's the seeking of meaning that the coding system allows them access to. But if they don't know what they're getting access to, it's not going to help them too much to just learn the coding system. So it all has to fit together.
Well, and I think what's so important here, as a former first grade teacher, and I've taught kindergarten as well, part-time at least, and I love those grades, because the kids are so curious about everything, and they don't know what they can't do until they come to school, actually. And they're just so full of energy. And what I love the success that we had, and this goes back many years ago, but when the kids were not learning to read, and we went to the kind of program that I was doing, what was going on in Australia and New Zealand, but kind of adjusting it for the US population. But it was all singing, reading aloud, having kids write their own stories. And that's how we could see that writing every day. They were writing about their lives, what their phonemic awareness was, what the phonic sounds they knew, that we could teach phonics systematically and explicitly and not use a program. You know, all of the sounds are in all of the books, and using real literature. And so having a classroom library and giving kids choice and agency and finding out what they're interested in, and really starting almost with the writing, and the writing and the reading not being separated. Introducing ourselves to each other. What are we good at? And then as the teacher, I did a lot of work, and I still do it in schools, what we call shared writing, where the teacher's holding the pen and taking down the message, and then we're reading it together. We're isolating words. We're noticing kids' names, who has the CH sound in their name. And so it's all of that going on at the same time. And it's absolutely joyful. It's totally joyful. the singing, as you mentioned, and then publishing children's writing, class authored, student authored, and that becoming part of the reading matter they do, and part of the word work they do. No worksheets, no program that where everybody has to be on the same page or the same day. And I worry that kids are not they're not reading, they're not reading great literature. They're reading books based on especially the little ones, based on the sounds in the book, practicing the sounds rather than, finding joy in the reading.
Right, right. Whereas the best way of practicing sounds is to get them to write.
Absolutely.
Because,
Absolutely.
their writing displays what they know about the sounds that they're learning.
I want to say one more thing and then ask you if you have anything else to say about this. But there's been a lot of criticism recently about the fact that people like us and many people that see the whole of language, that believe in giving kids whole text, not just pieces, and have them figure it out, say that what we're doing is we're teaching kids to guess if we give them, picture cues and just guess at the words. And I think it's really important that I don't remember ever as a reading recovery teacher or just as a reading teacher ever saying to a child, just guess. But it would be more like, look, predict. Now, based on what we know about this character or this topic, and looking at the word and the sounds that you know, and looking at the picture and looking at the charts, what would you predict? What would you hypothesize? That's very different than just saying, just guess. So that has been, I think, a point of contention that never should have been one.
It shouldn't have been one. And it is puzzling, Regie, because educated guessing is a part of learning. We make inferences all the time. Little
Absolutely.
kids make inferences, adult makes inferences. The great work of Jerome Bruner and his learning theory, which is probably the most important psychologist, or one of the most two important psychologists of the 20th century. So guessing, or educated guessing, or hypothesizing, or predicting is a part of the learning process. And it's a little puzzling why people are bothered by that. I'm not sure why, really.
Because it's uncertain. We people don't like uncertainty. That's why phonics is so popular. Partly, it's easy to measure. It's exact, right? I mean, well, it's not exact.
Oh,
It's not exact, but certain parts of it are. I think people aren't
well,
comfortable
I
with.
think people think that it's accurate, and it may be if you know the sounds of the language and you're just looking at highly regular, phonetically regular words, you may well come up with an exact pronunciation. But English is irregular when you're reading actual natural text rather than contrived text. The letters can take on all sorts of different sounds. And so you need the context to figure out what the word is oftentimes. That's true for many words. So you actually increase accuracy if you ask children to think about the meaning of what they're reading instead of just looking at the sounds.
That's a great point. It's a great point for living too. You need to know what the context is
Right.
in order to judge the situation. Um, This might be a good point to talk about how important professional learning is. And I want to, if teachers are going to take the lead and do what's right for kids, we have to be really knowledgeable. And you have put together, the two of you, a wonderful site called literacytalk.info. And Denise, if you could show us that, because you've done a great job with this is a great place for teachers and administrators, anybody who's interested in literacy to go to read the latest research, yours and others, and also tips on teaching. It's really terrific. So I've asked Denise to share it with you. There we go. Okay.
I think this should be here now.
Yeah.
We'll just take a minute to look at this, but we put this together so that we would have a place to as a repository for things that we have written. And everything is free to download if you're interested. We have practical tips. We have suggested readings, books, articles, online resources. We have some perspectives, our own perspectives on key issues, on decoding, and just a number of different articles. And you just click on one and you can download it. So there's also information from other good sites that people might be interested in looking at. So it's a work in progress. So that's what it is, literacy talk. And Regie, we're featuring your book on the homepage as the latest book that you've just come out with, which we both think is absolutely wonderful. So I don't know, we don't need to spend a lot of time with it, but you'll get anybody who's watching will get a link to it in the program notes for this event. And please stop by and see what you think of it and help yourself to whatever looks good.
It's literacytalk.info, and it's excellent. And the reason that it's so important, I think, is for teachers that are trying to do right by their kids, you need to have the research to counter what we're being told. And a lot of that research is cherry picking. And so you can go to your principal and say, well, wait a minute, I'm not happy about what I'm being asked to do here. And here's the research. And this is just
Right.
one source. We'll name some others as well. There are a lot of people doing good work now that are really, really important for teachers to make decisions, important
Regie,
decisions.
one of the articles Denise and I did a few months ago was called Phonemic Awareness, Phonics, and What Else? And we lay out what other things should appear in an early literacy curriculum, such as shared reading. We like experience stories and experience charts. I'm a big fan, and I think Denise is too, of predictable books, everything from the Very Hungry Caterpillar, Eric Carle's Very Hungry Caterpillar, to Joy Calley's Mrs. Wishy-Washy, and 100 books in between. Guided reading can be done very early and combined with shared reading or with listening comprehension, the writing process. So we did that article to say to teachers, besides phonics, what else can you put into your curriculum to have a very reasoned kind of curriculum? So that's just one article. We try to put up an article on an average of maybe once or twice a month. So we try to get a couple articles in every month. Sometimes we don't do that, but there are articles in process that we're going to be putting up soon.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, I think we're near closing time. So if we can, Denise, maybe start with you, message that you want to leave our viewers with.
Well, yes, I'd like to just piggyback on what Dorsey just said
Sure.
about actually finding information, and the research that is most valuable, we think, is the research that can be validated by experienced, successful teachers. And some of the research that comes out, and this is not just true today, it's been true for quite some time, many years, it becomes very removed from actual classroom practice. And what we need is teachers who are experienced, successful teachers, practicing teachers, understanding the research from their perspective. And I think we're going to make better progress when we have more of that.
Oh, that's a great comment. Very important. Dorsey?
Yeah. Well, I think about where we are now and where we need to go. And I'm going to predict that the next big push in reading is going to be reading comprehension. And the reason I say that is because scores are not going up in fourth and fifth grade. And with this heavy emphasis on phonics, we're going to see a lot of non-readers, and we're going to see a lot of children who are skilled in phonics, but low in comprehension. So I think in the next few years, we're going to see a very exciting era when we return to focusing on comprehension as a priority. I have great faith in classroom teachers. And when I think of that, I think of your book, The Heart-Centered Teacher, a wonderful book, an inspiring book. I was privileged to do a review for it, Regie, and it's the right book at the right time. David Pearson and I had this conversation a few years ago, and we thought what would hold the center was classroom teachers. A few decades ago, when some teachers were told phonics isn't important, what teachers did was close their doors and taught phonics because they knew it was important. Now, when we're hearing that it's all about phonics, good teachers, enlightened teachers need to close their doors, and I think they will, and teach children to think about what they're reading, to make predictions, to make educated guesses, and do all the things that round out a really important curriculum. So I have great faith that veteran teachers are going to do this in the coming months. It won't be easy because previously, when phonics was such a priority, it was a recommendation. Now it's a mandate. So it's going to take some courage. But if we show courage here, I think we'll come out very well in the next few years and move to a more reasoned curriculum than we have right now.
I love your optimism. Thank you. Very, very important. Well, I'm going to close with a quote from your book, from the Comprehension Experience. This is near the end of your book. In the hundreds of primary classrooms we have visited or worked in, we can say without reservation that meaning-oriented, comprehension-first instruction produces the highest rates of success and the most joy for both students and teachers. And I love that quote. And I think that, we want to end on the message of joy. Nobody's talking about that in terms of teaching reading. And I like to say, and I've been saying this, I think, for about a decade now, teaching readers, we're teaching people. And we want all kids to be enthralled readers. We want them to be interested and engaged and finding out about the world. And for that, we need great books and empowered teachers. Good luck to everybody who's watching, and great to be with you, Dorsey and Denise, today. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Regie.
Thank you, Regie.